Amid a devastating storm, a desperate woman abandons a defenseless child at the edge of a forest. Alone, fragile, and burning with fever, the girl seems to have been forgotten by the world. But fate crosses her path with a millionaire who unknowingly carries a past deeply connected to that child. A decision made in that moment will ignite a spark of hope. If you love great stories, please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're from. We'll keep going. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the torrential downpour as Melissa Parker gripped the steering wheel of her rusted Chevrolet. The late September storm had transformed the narrow mountain roads of rural Tennessee into treacherous rivers of mud and debris. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky, briefly illuminating the desperate expression on her gaunt face. In the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of her daughter Emma, barely 5 years old, huddled in the back seat. The child's complexion was alarmingly pale, her thin frame racked by violent shivers, despite the fever that burned through her small body. Emma's summer dress, now damp with sweat, offered little protection against the chill that permeated the car's broken heating system. Melissa pulled over to the shoulder of the deserted road, her hands trembling as she cut the engine. The dense Appalachian forest loomed around them, ancient trees swaying menacingly in the fierce wind. For a moment she sat motionless, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the raindrops that leaked through the car's damaged roof. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered to herself, the words catching in her throat. "I just can't." With a deep breath that did nothing to steady her nerves, Melissa stepped out into the storm. The rain immediately soaked through her thin jacket as she opened the rear door and gathered Emma into her arms. The child was limp, her eyes fluttering between consciousness and delirium from the fever that had raged for days now, a fever Melissa couldn't afford to treat, not with the eviction notice waiting at their trailer and the final rejection. Letter from Emma's father crumpled in her pocket. Clutching her daughter close, Melissa trudged into the forest, her sneakers sinking into the mud with each step. The canopy of trees offered little shelter from the relentless rain as she ventured deeper into the wilderness, guided only by her desperation and the occasional flash of lightning. "Someone will find you," she murmured, her voice breaking. "Someone better than me. Someone who can give you what you need." Finding a small clearing partially sheltered by the sprawling roots of an ancient oak, Melissa gently placed Emma on the ground. The child didn't stir, didn't react to the cold. Mud seeping into her clothes or the raindrops pelting her feverish face. Melissa hesitated, her hand lingering on her daughter's burning cheek. Then, with a strangled sob, she turned and ran, refusing to look back as the forest swallowed her retreating figure. The storm intensified, thunder cracking overhead as Emma lay motionless on the forest floor, her small body almost disappearing among the fallen leaves and mud. Nearly an hour later, a sleek black Range Rover navigated the same treacherous road. Behind the wheel sat Andrew Blackwood, his sharp features illuminated by the glow of the dashboard. At 42, Andrew had built his real estate development company from nothing into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that had transformed the skylines of Nashville and Memphis. Tonight, however, his thoughts were far from business deals and profit margins. "Damn this weather," he muttered, leaning forward to peer through the windshield as mud splashed against the luxury vehicle. The development site he needed to inspect could wait until morning, but the exclusive mountain lodge where he had reservations wouldn't hold his suite past midnight. A flash of lightning illuminated something unusual at the edge of the forest, a splash of color that seemed out of place among the browns and greens of the wilderness. Andrew frowned, slowing the Range Rover to a crawl. It was probably nothing, just a piece of trash blown by the wind. Still, something compelled him to stop. Pulling onto the shoulder, Andrew grabbed his umbrella and stepped out into the storm. The rain hammered against the canopy as he approached the tree line, squinting to locate whatever had caught his attention. Another lightning strike revealed a small clearing just beyond the first row of trees, and there, half buried in mud and leaves, lay a child. "Jesus Christ," Andrew gasped, dropping his umbrella as he rushed forward. The little girl was soaked to the bone, her body radiating heat despite the cold rain. She showed no reaction to his approach, no sign that she was aware of his presence at all. Without hesitation, Andrew removed his cashmere coat and wrapped it around the child's frail body. She was light, too light, as he lifted her carefully from the mud. Her head lolled against his chest, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Hey, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice unusually gentle. The girl didn't respond, didn't even open her eyes. Andrew carried her swiftly back to his vehicle, placing her gently on the back seat before cranking the heat to maximum. As he pulled back onto the road, Andrew scanned the area for any sign of other vehicles or people. Finding none, he reached for his phone, only to discover there was no signal in this remote stretch of the mountains. The nearest town was at least 20 miles away, and he wasn't sure the child could wait that long. Through the driving rain, Andrew spotted a faint light in the distance, a farmhouse set back from the road, its windows glowing warmly against the darkness. It wasn't the medical help the child clearly needed, but it was closer than anything else. The gravel driveway crunched beneath the Range Rover's tires as Andrew pulled up to the weathered two-story farmhouse. The front porch light flickered on and a man stepped out, shotgun cautiously held at his side, a common precaution in these isolated parts. "I need help," Andrew called out, already opening his car door. "I found a child on the side of the road. She's sick, burning with fever." The man, Daniel Foster according to the mailbox, immediately lowered his weapon and hurried forward, his daughter Olivia close behind him. They paid no attention to Andrew's expensive watch or designer clothes, their focus entirely on the small bundle he was carrying. "Bring her inside, quick," Daniel instructed, holding the door open as Andrew carried the child into the warm farmhouse. "Olivia, get the guest room ready," Daniel ordered as he cleared space on the living room sofa, "and bring my medical kit." "You're a doctor?" Andrew asked, carefully laying the girl down. "Veterinarian," Daniel replied, his weathered hands gentle as he checked the child's pulse. "But I know enough. This little one's in trouble. Her fever's dangerously high." Olivia returned with towels and a worn medical bag. At 26, she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to emergency situations, her auburn hair hastily tied back as she assessed the child with practiced eyes. "Dad, look at this," she said quietly, demonstrating how the girl showed no reaction to the thunderclap that had just rattled the windows. "I don't think she can hear us." Daniel nodded grimly. Could be the fever, but he snapped his fingers near the child's ear. Nothing. He tried again, louder. The girl remained unresponsive, though her eyes had begun to flutter open. "I think she's deaf," Olivia concluded, her expression softening as she gently stroked the matted hair from the child's forehead. "Poor thing. Where did you find her?" Andrew described the location, his voice tight with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "She was just left there in the mud during this storm." "Who would do such a thing?" Daniel muttered, already preparing a solution to bring down the fever. The little girl's eyes finally opened fully, revealing striking blue irises clouded with confusion and fear. She looked around wildly, her gaze darting from Daniel to Olivia, before settling on Andrew. Though she made no sound, her panic was evident in the way her small body tensed. "It's okay, sweetheart," Olivia soothed, instinctively using simple gestures to indicate safety. "You're safe now." To everyone's surprise, the child's hands moved in response, forming shapes that none of them understood. She was trying to communicate. "She knows sign language," Daniel realized. "Olivia, call Rachel from the elementary school tomorrow. She works with hearing-impaired kids." As Olivia nodded and continued to comfort the child, Andrew stood back, watching the scene unfold with an inexplicable tightness in his chest. Something about the little girl's eyes tugged at his memory, a forgotten moment from years ago that he had deliberately buried beneath layers of ambition and success. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the farmhouse, a different kind of tempest was brewing, one that would soon connect their lives in ways none of them could possibly imagine. Morning arrived with gentle rays of sunlight filtering through the curtains of the Foster farmhouse. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape washed clean, puddles reflecting the clear blue sky. Inside, Olivia sat beside the little girl's bed, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. The fever had broken sometime before dawn, thanks to Daniel's careful attention and the herbal remedies Olivia's late mother had taught her to prepare. Andrew Blackwood had spent the night in an uncomfortable armchair, refusing to leave until he knew the child would be all right. Now he stood by the window, coffee mug in hand, watching as Daniel checked on their small patient. "She's doing better," Daniel announced, his voice hushed. "Still weak, but the fever's down. She needs proper medical attention, though." "I can." "Drive her to the hospital in Asheville," Andrew offered immediately. "It's about an hour from here, but they have the best pediatric unit in the region." Olivia shook her head. "Let's wait until she wakes up properly. Taking her to a strange place might terrify her, especially if she can't hear us explain what's happening." As if on cue, the little girl's eyes fluttered open. She looked around the room, momentary panic giving way to cautious curiosity. When her gaze fell on Olivia, she seemed to relax slightly, perhaps recognizing the kind face from the night before. "Good morning, sweetheart," Olivia said, making sure to face the child directly so she could see her lips. Simultaneously, she made a simple gesture of greeting. The girl's hands moved in response, forming shapes and patterns that none of them understood. "I've called Rachel," Daniel said. "She teaches at the School for Deaf Children in Knoxville. She's driving up but won't be here until this afternoon." Andrew checked his watch, frowning. "I should be in Nashville by now. There's a board meeting at 11. Daniel and Olivia exchanged a look but said nothing. After an awkward pause, Andrew sighed and pulled out his phone. "I'll reschedule," he muttered, stepping out of the room to make the call. The little girl watched him leave, her blue eyes tracking his movements with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. When he was gone, she turned to Olivia and pointed to her stomach, her expression pleading. "You're hungry," Olivia realized. "Dad, can you make some of your famous pancakes? Something gentle for her stomach." As Daniel headed to the kitchen, Olivia helped the child sit up, noticing how the oversized t-shirt they'd dressed her in after removing her wet clothes hung from her thin frame. The girl's hands moved again, this time pointing to herself and then making a series of gestures. "I wish I understood," Olivia sighed. She reached for a notepad and pencil on the nightstand. "Can you write your name?" The child looked at the paper, then carefully took the pencil. With unsteady hands, she printed 5 letters, E-M-M-A. "Emma," Olivia smiled. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Olivia." She wrote her own name beneath Emma's, then pointed to herself. Emma nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. It transformed her face, bringing color to her pale cheeks. She wrote another word, H-U-N-G-R-Y. "Pancakes are coming," Olivia assured her, miming eating. "And then we'll get you some clean clothes. Mine will be too big, but we can make them work until we find something better." From the doorway, Andrew watched this interaction, his expression unreadable. He had just finished cancelling not only his board meeting, but all appointments for the next 3 days. His assistant had been shocked. Andrew Blackwood never took unplanned time off, not even when he'd come down with pneumonia last winter. "Something's come up," was all he'd told her. "Handle it." Now, looking at the small girl communicating with Olivia, Andrew felt something stir within him, a mixture of emotions he couldn't quite name. Compassion, certainly, but also something deeper, more unsettling. A sense of recognition that made no logical sense. "Pancakes are ready," Daniel announced, appearing behind Andrew with a tray. "Thought our guest might be more comfortable eating in bed." As they helped Emma sit up properly, supporting her with pillows, Andrew noticed a small birthmark behind her right ear, a crescent-shaped mark that made his breath catch in his throat. He knew that mark. He'd seen it before on another little ear in a photograph he'd received 5 years ago, a photograph he'd crumpled and thrown away, along with the letter demanding child support. "Is something wrong?" Olivia asked, noticing his sudden pallor. Andrew shook his head. "No, just remembering something." He retreated to the hallway, pulling out his phone again, this time to send a text message to his private investigator. "Need information on Jessica Reynolds. Last known location, current status and any children." Jessica, the waitress from that roadside diner in Gatlinburg. The weekend that was supposed to mean nothing had meant nothing until her letter arrived 9 months later. The letter he'd instructed his lawyer to respond to with a dismissal and a warning, prove paternity, or face a harassment suit. He'd never heard from her again, had assumed the problem had gone away. But now, a deaf child with Jessica's blue eyes and his mother's distinctive birthmark had appeared out of nowhere, abandoned in a storm. The chime of an incoming message interrupted his thoughts. Reynolds left Tennessee 3 years ago. Believed working in Virginia. Had daughter Emma, now 5. Child deaf from birth. Will get more details. Andrew leaned against the wall, the confirmation hitting him like a physical blow. That child, Emma, was almost certainly his daughter. A daughter he had rejected before even meeting her. A daughter whose mother had apparently abandoned her in desperation. Inside the bedroom, Emma was cautiously tasting a pancake, her eyes widening with delight at the sweetness of the maple syrup. Olivia laughed at her expression, demonstrating how to cut the pancake into bite-sized pieces. Daniel stepped into the hallway, closing the door partially behind him. "She's malnourished," he told Andrew quietly, "and there are signs of long-term neglect. Not abuse exactly, but not proper care either. When Rachel gets here, we should ask about contacting child services." Andrew felt his stomach twist. Childy. Services. Foster care. A system he knew was overloaded and underfunded, especially for children with special needs. His daughter, because he was now almost certain that's who she was, would become another statistic. Another case file. "Let's wait," he heard himself saying. "See what we can learn from her first. Maybe there's family who can take her in." Daniel studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That's reasonable, but we can't wait too long. She needs stability, proper medical care, someone who can communicate with her." "I understand," Andrew replied, though in truth he understood nothing about this situation or the turmoil of emotions it was creating within him. The sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Through the window they saw a compact car pulling up next to Andrew's Range Rover. A woman in her 30s emerged, carrying a large messenger bag, Rachel Bennett, the sign language teacher, arriving earlier than expected. Daniel went to greet her while Andrew returned to the bedroom. Emma had finished her pancakes and was now attempting to communicate something to Olivia through elaborate gestures. Her small face was animated with effort, frustration evident as Olivia struggled to understand. "Help has arrived," Andrew announced, catching Olivia's attention. "The teacher is here." Emma noticed the shift in attention and turned to look at the doorway just as Rachel entered. The woman smiled warmly, immediately raising her hands to sign a greeting. Emma's entire demeanor transformed. Her eyes widened. Her posture straightened, and her hands flew into motion, signing rapidly. Rachel responded in kind, their silent conversation flowing naturally. After a few exchanges, Rachel turned to the adults. "She's asking where her mother is," she explained, her expression carefully neutral. "And she wants to know if you're the people her grandmother told her about." "What people?" Olivia asked. Rachel signed the question to Emma, who responded with a series of gestures. "She says her grandmother told her that if anything happened, she should find the man in the big house on the hill. The man who was her real father." Rachel paused, looking at Andrew with sudden interest. "She's asking if you're him." Andrew felt the weight of 3 pairs of eyes on him. Rachel's curious, Olivia's surprised, and most devastatingly, Emma's hopeful. The little girl was watching him with such intensity that he could almost feel it physically, her blue eyes, Jessica's eyes, searching his face for confirmation. Andrew began, then faltered. The truth hovered on his lips, but fear held it back. Fear of responsibility, of change, of the implications this would have for his carefully controlled life. "I don't know," he finished lamely. Rachel relayed this to Emma, whose small shoulders slumped visibly. She signed something else, her movements smaller, deflated. "She says her mother took her to find her father, but he got angry when he saw she couldn't hear," Rachel translated, her voice taking on an edge. "She says he tore up her grandmother's a letter and told them to leave. After that, her mother drove for a long time, crying. Emma fell asleep, and when she woke up..." Rachel paused, her hands stilling as Emma continued to sign. When she woke up, she was alone in the forest, and then the nice man found her. The room fell silent. Olivia looked stricken, Daniel's expression hardened, and Rachel watched Andrew with barely concealed suspicion. But it was Emma's face that Andrew couldn't bear to see. The resignation there, the acceptance of rejection that no 5-year-old should ever have to feel. "I need some air," he muttered, turning abruptly and heading for the front door. Behind him, he heard Rachel begin to sign again, probably explaining his departure to Emma in gentler terms than he deserved. Outside, the morning sun felt too bright, too exposing. Andrew stood on the porch, gripping the railing as the weight of his past decisions threatened to crush him. He had a daughter he had rejected without ever meeting her, a daughter who had been abandoned in the wilderness because of his callousness. And now fate or coincidence or some cosmic justice had placed her directly in his path. There would be no more pretending she didn't exist, no more ignoring the responsibility he had spent 5 years evading. The question was, what would he do about it now? The midday sun cast dappled shadows through the maple trees surrounding the Foster farmhouse. Inside, Rachel sat cross-legged on the floor opposite Emma, their hands moving in a beautiful dance of communication. Olivia watched from the doorway, fascinated by the connection forming between the two. In just a few hours, Emma had begun to emerge from her shell, her expressions becoming more animated as she found someone who understood her language. "She's incredibly bright," Rachel explained during a brief pause. "Her signing is advanced. For her age, someone took the time to teach her properly." "Her grandmother, apparently," Daniel said, entering with a tray of sandwiches. "From what you've translated, the grandmother raised her while the mother worked." Rachel nodded, accepting a sandwich with thanks. "That's what she's saying. Her grandmother was her primary caregiver until a few months ago. Then she got sick." Rachel hesitated, glancing at Emma, who was distracted by her own sandwich. "Emma doesn't say she died, but she uses the sign for went away to heaven, so I think that's what happened." "And then the mother took over?" Olivia asked softly. "Yes, but Emma indicates her mother didn't know sign language very well." There was a communication barrier. Rachel took a bite of her sandwich, thinking, "From what I gather, they were struggling financially. Emma mentions being hungry a lot, moving to different places, her mother crying often." Outside on the porch, Andrew sat motionless, listening through the open window. He had spent the last hour on the phone with his assistant and lawyer, attempting to manage his business remotely, while also making discreet inquiries about Jessica Reynolds. The picture emerging was one of increasing desperation. A single mother with a special needs child, working multiple jobs, losing her support system when the grandmother passed. And then, the final desperate act, seeking out the child's father, only to be rejected again. Andrew pinched the bridge of his nose, fighting off a headache born of guilt and confusion. He couldn't change the past, but the present demanded a decision. His phone buzzed with an incoming message from his private investigator. "Jessica Reynolds admitted to Mercy Hospital in Bristol, attempted overdose after abandoning child. Critical condition." The news hit him like a physical blow. Jessica had tried to end her life after leaving Emma in the forest. The cascade of consequences from his rejection was becoming increasingly devastating. Inside, Rachel had moved on to teaching Olivia some basic signs. Emma watched with delight as Olivia clumsily attempted to form the shapes with her fingers, giggling silently when Olivia accidentally signed something nonsensical. "She's going to need a proper evaluation," Rachel was saying to Daniel. "Medical, psychological, educational. I can help arrange that through my school. There are excellent resources available, but we need to establish guardianship first," Daniel finished, his voice low. "Child services will need to be involved." The word guardianship penetrated Andrew's fog of guilt. With sudden clarity, he realized he couldn't let Emma enter the system. Whatever his failings as a father, and they were monumental, he couldn't compound them by abandoning her a second time. Andrew stood and entered the house, his decision made. 4 pairs of eyes turned to him. Daniel's cautious, Rachel's assessing, Olivia's hopeful, and Emma's. Emma's eyes held a wariness that broke something inside him. "I need to speak with all of you," he said, directing his words to the adults. Privately, Rachel signed something to Emma, who nodded and returned her attention to a picture book Olivia had given her earlier. The adults moved to the kitchen, closing the door partially but keeping Emma in view through the gap. "Jessica Reynolds is in the hospital," Andrew began without preamble. "She attempted to take her own life after leaving Emma in the forest." "Olivia," gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Daniel's expression darkened, and Rachel closed her eyes briefly, processing this information. "How do you know this?" Daniel asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Andrew took a deep breath. "Because I had my investigator looking for her, because I needed to confirm what I already suspected." He paused, forcing himself to meet their gazes. "Emma is my daughter." The kitchen fell silent, the only sound the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room. "You're the father who rejected her," Rachel stated flatly. It wasn't a question. "Yes." The admission felt both terrible and liberating. 5 years ago, Jessica sent me a letter informing me she was pregnant. I had my lawyer handle it, demand a paternity test, threaten legal action if she persisted without proof. She never contacted me again. "And you never followed up?" Daniel's voice carried a harsh judgment Andrew couldn't dispute. "No. I convinced myself it wasn't my problem." Andrew ran a hand through his hair. "Then yesterday, she showed up at my house with Emma. I wasn't home. I was on my way here for a business meeting. My housekeeper said a woman and child came looking for me, but she turned them away as instructed." "So Jessica drove into the mountains looking for you," Olivia pieced together. "And when she couldn't find you, she gave up," Andrew finished, the words bitter in his mouth. "She abandoned Emma and tried to end her life." The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, almost unbearable in its intensity. His actions, or inactions, had led directly to this tragedy. "What happens now?" Rachel asked, her professional demeanor returning. "Are you planning to take responsibility for Emma?" The question hung in the air. Through the partially open door, Andrew could see Emma sitting on the living room floor, carefully turning the pages of her book. His daughter, a stranger to him, yet undeniably his blood. "Yes," he said finally. "I'll need to establish paternity, officially, but I don't doubt the results. I want to take responsibility for her." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "Just like that? You're ready to be a father to a special needs child you met yesterday? A child you rejected twice before?" Andrew flinched at the bluntness, but couldn't deny the validity of the question. "I don't expect it to be easy. I know I'll need help, professional help, but I have resources. I can provide for her in ways Jessica couldn't." "She needs more than material provisions," Rachel pointed out. "She needs communication, understanding, patience. She needs to learn to trust again after being abandoned." "I know," Andrew acknowledged. "I'm not suggesting I can do this alone. I'll hire specialists, tutors, whatever she needs. But she's my responsibility, my daughter." Olivia, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. "Shouldn't we ask Emma what she wants? She's been through enough trauma without having her life decided for her again." The simplicity and wisdom of this suggestion silenced everyone. Of course, Emma should have a voice in her future. The irony that they had been discussing a deaf child without considering her perspective was not lost on any of them. Rachel nodded and moved toward the living room, but Andrew stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "Before we do that," he said quietly, "I need to know something. Is it possible to learn sign language as an adult, to become fluent enough to truly communicate with her?" The question revealed more vulnerability than Andrew had intended, but it was essential. He needed to know if he could ever truly connect with his daughter. Rachel's expression softened slightly. "Yes, with dedication and practice. Many parents of deaf children become quite proficient. It takes time and commitment, but it's absolutely possible." "Will you teach me?" Andrew asked. "I'll pay whatever your rate is. Work around your schedule." Rachel studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll teach you the basics. If you're serious about this, there are intensive programs you can enroll in, but we can start today with a few essential signs." Relief washed over Andrew. It was a small beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. They returned to the living room where Emma looked up expectantly. Rachel knelt beside her and began signing. Andrew watched, mesmerized by the fluid movements of their hands and the expressiveness of Emma's face as she responded. After a lengthy exchange, Rachel turned to the others. I've explained that Andrew is her biological father and that he'd like to take care of her. I've also told her about her mother being in the hospital. Rachel paused. She's asking if she has to go with him right away, or if she can stay here, or a bit longer. She says she feels safe here. The simple honesty of the child's request made Andrew's chest tighten. Of course, she felt safer with these kind strangers than with the father who had rejected her. He had years of damage to undo, trust to earn. Tell her she can stay as long as she needs to, Daniel said before Andrew could respond. Our home is open to her. Olivia nodded in agreement. We have plenty of space, and I'd be happy to start learning sign language too. We could all learn together. Andrew felt a complex mixture of gratitude and jealousy at their easy acceptance of his daughter. These people, who had known Emma for less than a day, were already more connected to her than he was. Thank them for me, he said to Rachel. And tell Emma that I'd like to visit every day to get to know her. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't there before, but I want to be here now. As Rachel translated, Andrew watched Emma's face. The child's expression remained guarded, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Not quite hope, but perhaps the seed from which hope might eventually grow. Emma's hands moved in response, forming shapes Andrew couldn't yet understand. She says, okay, Rachel translated. She'd like to get to know you too, and Rachel smiled slightly. She wants to know if you have a horse. Apparently, her grandmother told her that her father lived in a big house with horses. Andrew blinked in surprise. I don't, but... He looked at Daniel. You have horses here, right? I noticed a stable when I drove in. Daniel nodded. Just 2 old quarter horses. Nothing fancy. Emma can meet them whenever she feels ready, Olivia offered. They're very gentle, especially Daisy. When this was translated, Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile Andrew had seen from her. The transformation was remarkable. Her entire being seemed to glow with excitement. She signed rapidly to Rachel. She says her grandmother had a book about a girl and her horse, and she always wanted to meet a real one, Rachel explained, matching Emma's smile. She's asking if she can see them now. Olivia laughed. Of course. Let me find you some boots that might fit. It's muddy out there after the storm. As Olivia led Emma away to find appropriate footwear, Andrew turned to Daniel. Thank you for this, for taking her in, for being so kind to her. To us. Daniel's weathered face softened slightly. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Blackwood. You've got a long road ahead of you, a lifetime of responsibility that begins today. I'm just giving you and that little girl a safe place to start the journey. Andrew nodded, accepting both the kindness and the implicit challenge in Daniel's words. He had failed Emma for the first 5 years of her life. He wouldn't fail her again. Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds, casting golden light across the farmyard. From the stable came the sound of Olivia's laughter, and though Emma made no audible sound, Andrew could feel her joy radiating across the distance between them, a silent happiness that somehow made more noise in his heart than anything he had ever heard before. The next morning arrived with a gentle mist hanging over the Foster farm. Andrew pulled his Range Rover up the gravel driveway, earlier than he had planned. Sleep had eluded him, his mind too full of revelations and responsibilities. In the passenger seat beside him sat a collection of hastily purchased items, children's, clothes in approximately Emma's size, a teddy bear with honey-colored fur, and several picture books about horses. He found Olivia in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The scent of cinnamon and coffee filled the warm space, a stark contrast to the sterile modernity of his own home. You're early, she remarked, but her smile was welcoming. Emma's still asleep. She had a big day yesterday with the horses. Andrew nodded, setting his packages on the kitchen table. I couldn't sleep, thought I might as well make myself useful. He hesitated, feeling strangely out of place in this homey kitchen. I brought some things for Emma. I wasn't sure what she might need. Olivia's expression softened as she examined the contents of the bags. This was thoughtful. She'll especially love the horse books. She paused, studying him more carefully. You look exhausted. I went to the hospital last night, Andrew admitted, accepting the cup of coffee Olivia offered, to see Jessica. How is she? Stable but unconscious. They're not sure if... He couldn't finish the sentence. The sight of Jessica, once vibrant and laughing, lying pale and unresponsive, had shaken him more than he expected. She had aged beyond her 30 years, worry lines etched deeply around her mouth, her body thin from overwork and stress. I'm sorry, Olivia said simply, resting a hand briefly on his arm. Andrew nodded, grateful for her lack of judgment. I found this in her belongings. He removed a worn envelope from his jacket pocket. The nurse said she had it clutched in her hand when they brought her in. The envelope was addressed to him in faded ink, the paper soft from being handled. Repeatedly. Inside was a letter dated 5 years ago, the original letter Jessica had sent announcing her pregnancy, along with a photograph of a newborn, Emma. She kept it all this time, Andrew said quietly. Even after my lawyer sent that cold response, she held on to it. Kept hoping, maybe. Olivia didn't respond immediately, giving him space to process the implications. Did you read it? She finally asked. Yes. It wasn't what I expected. Andrew stared into his coffee. She didn't ask for money, not really. She just wanted me to know about Emma, to have the chance to be part of her life. He laughed bitterly. I was so convinced she was trying to trap me, to get a piece of my fortune. I never even considered that she might simply be trying to do the right thing. The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation. Daniel appeared in the doorway, followed by a sleep-tousled Emma. The child froze when she saw Andrew, uncertainty flashing across her face before Olivia stepped forward with a bright smile, signing a good morning that Rachel had taught her yesterday. Emma's expression relaxed, and she signed back, her movements still cautious but less fearful than the day before. She noticed the packages on the table, curiosity overcoming her hesitation as she approached. These are for you, Andrew said, making sure to face her directly so she could see his lips. He wished he knew how to sign the words, but for now, this would have to do. Emma looked to Olivia for confirmation, and when she nodded encouragingly, the child began to explore the gifts. Her face lit up at the horsebooks, and she clutched the teddy bear to her chest with obvious delight. When she came to the clothes, she looked at them with surprise, then at her current outfit, Olivia's t-shirt knotted to fit her small frame. With deliberate movements, Emma signed something to Olivia, who looked helplessly at Daniel. Neither had learned enough sign language yet to understand. I think she's asking if she can change into the new clothes, Andrew ventured, remembering how Jessica had always been eager to wear new things immediately. Emma nodded vigorously, confirming his guess. Olivia smiled and led her upstairs to change, leaving Andrew and Daniel alone in the kitchen. I went to see Jessica last night, Andrew began, but Daniel held up a hand. Olivia texted me, I'm sorry about Jessica's condition. He poured himself coffee, his movements precise. What happens now? The directness of the question was exactly what Andrew needed. I've started the legal process to establish paternity and seek temporary custody of Emma. My lawyer is drawing up the paperwork. Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. And if Jessica recovers? Then we'll work something out. Shared custody, perhaps. I don't want to take Emma away from her mother. Andrew ran a hand through his hair. I just want to make things right. Making things right isn't always simple, Daniel observed, especially when a child is involved. Emma's world has been turned upside down multiple times already. She needs stability. I know, Andrew agreed. That's why I'm grateful she can stay here while I figure things out. Get my home ready for her, learn more sign language, find the right specialists. Before Daniel could respond, Emma returned to the kitchen, proudly wearing her new jeans and purple sweater. The clothes were slightly too large, but her delight was evident as she twirled to show them off. Olivia followed, carrying a brush and hair ties. Someone's excited about her new outfit, Olivia smiled. I thought we might try to do something with her hair too. It's pretty tangled. Emma climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table, sitting patiently as Olivia began to gently work through the knots in her blonde hair. Andrew watched, mesmerized by the simple domestic scene. This was what Emma's life should have been all along. Warm kitchens, gentle hands, new clothes that made her feel special. As if sensing his thoughts, Emma glanced at him, her blue eyes, so like Jessica's, studying him with that same unnerving intensity he'd noticed before. She made a small hand gesture, pointing to him and then forming a shape he didn't recognize. "She's asking if you're staying for breakfast," Olivia translated, having recognized one of the signs Rachel had taught her. Andrew hesitated only briefly. "Yes, if that's all right. Board meetings and development plans could wait." This moment, his daughter looking at him with cautious hope, couldn't. Breakfast was a surprisingly comfortable affair. Daniel made pancakes shaped like horses, earning a silent giggle from Emma. Andrew found himself relaxing, drawn into the warmth of this family dynamic that was so foreign to his own experience. His childhood had been marked by formal meals taken in silence, achievements celebrated with restrained nods rather than affectionate hugs. Rachel arrived as they were finishing, bringing more books and educational materials for Emma. The child's face lit up at the sight of her new friend, her hands immediately flying into animated conversation. "She's telling me about the horses," Rachel explained to the others. "Apparently, Daisy let her sit on her back yesterday. It was quite the adventure." Andrew watched as Rachel and Emma continued their slunt conversation, feeling both excluded and fascinated. His daughter lived in a world of visual communication he couldn't yet access. The realization strengthened his determination to learn sign language as quickly as possible. "I've brought something else," Rachel said, reaching into her bag. "Some preliminary educational assessments we can do with Emma. I'd like to get a sense of where she is academically." The morning passed in a blur of activities. Emma proved to be remarkably bright, her reading skills well advanced for her age. Mathematics was more challenging, but she approached each problem with determination, Andrew observed, increasingly impressed by his daughter's intelligence and resilience. During a break, his phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. "Eleanor Blackwood called, insistent on speaking with you, says it's urgent." Andrew froze, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. His mother, the formidable Eleanor Blackwood, whose approval he had spent his entire life seeking and rarely receiving. The woman who had taught him that business always came before personal matters, that showing emotion was a weakness, that every relationship had a potential cost and benefit. What would she make of Emma, of this situation? "Everything okay?" Daniel asked, noticing his sudden tension. "My mother," Andrew replied, his voice tight. "She's trying to reach me." Daniel raised an eyebrow but didn't comment further. He didn't need to. His expression made it clear he understood the complexity family relationships could hold. Andrew stepped outside to make the call, bracing himself for his mother's disapproval. Eleanor answered on the first ring, her voice crisp and controlled as always. "Andrew, I've been trying to reach you for 24 hours. Your assistant refuses to tell me where you are." "I'm handling a personal matter, Mother. More important than the riverfront development meeting? Harrison called me directly when you didn't show up. It was embarrassing." Andrew took a deep breath, looking back at the farmhouse where his daughter was learning and laughing. "Yes, more important. I've discovered I have a daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. He could almost see his mother's face, the careful rearrangement of her features as she processed this information and calculated its implications. "Explain," she finally said, her tone neutral. Andrew did, providing the bare facts of the situation. Jessica's letter 5 years ago, his dismissal of her claims, Emma's abandonment and his accidental discovery of her. He left out the emotional details, speaking in the business-like manner his mother preferred. "Where is the child now?" Eleanor asked when he finished. "Staying with a local family while I make arrangements. She's deaf, Mother. She needs specialized care." Another pause, longer this time. "Bring her to the house." "What?" Andrew hadn't expected this response. "Bring her to Blackwood Manor, today. I want to meet my granddaughter." The call ended before Andrew could respond, leaving him staring at his phone in confusion. His mother had never shown interest in children, had in fact largely delegated his own upbringing to a series of nannies and boarding schools. Why would she want to meet Emma? Inside, he found Emma sitting on the floor with Rachel, practicing new signs. The child looked up as he entered, offering a small tentative smile that transformed her face. Andrew felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed. "My mother wants to meet Emma," he announced to the room. "Today." Rachel frowned. "Is that a good idea? Emma's just starting to feel secure here." Eleanor. "Blackwood is not known for her patience," Andrew replied dryly, "or for taking no for an answer." Daniel exchanged a look with Olivia. "The Blackwood family is influential in this region," he explained to Rachel. "Eleanor Blackwood sits on the hospital board, among other things." The implication was clear. Eleanor's influence could help or hinder Emma's situation, particularly regarding Jessica's care. "We should ask Emma," Olivia suggested, her gentle voice cutting through the tension. "It's her life we're discussing." Rachel nodded and signed the question to Emma, explaining who Eleanor was and that she wanted to meet her. Emma's response was surprisingly decisive. She nodded, then signed something that made Rachel smile. "She says she wants to meet her grandmother. And she wants to know if her grandmother has horses too." The simplicity of the child's priority broke the tension, drawing smiles from everyone. Andrew felt a surge of admiration for his daughter's courage, facing yet another new situation, with curiosity rather than fear. "Tell her my mother doesn't have horses, but she has a very large garden with a fish pond," Andrew said, "and that I'll be with her the whole time." As Rachel translated, Emma considered this information seriously, then signed her response. "She says that's acceptable," Rachel translated, amusement in her voice, "but she wants Olivia to come too." Andrew looked at Olivia in surprise. In just 2 days, Emma had formed a strong attachment to the veterinarian's daughter. Olivia smiled, clearly touched by the child's request. "I'd be happy to come," she said, "if that's all right with you, Andrew." For the first time, Andrew heard her use his first name, and he realized how much he appreciated the lack of formality. In his world of business associates and employees, few people spoke to him so naturally. "I'd be grateful for your company," he admitted. "My mother can be intimidating." Olivia laughed. "I grew up with 3 older brothers and a father who rescues injured bears. I think I can handle Mrs. Blackwood." The casual confidence in her voice was reassuring. As they prepared for the visit, gathering Emma's new clothes and books, explaining to her what to expect, Andrew found himself increasingly grateful for Olivia's steady presence. She moved through life with an ease he had never mastered, despite all his wealth and influence. What would Eleanor make of her, of this situation, of the granddaughter whose existence had been hidden from her for 5 years? As they loaded into his Range Rover, Emma clutching her new teddy bear, Andrew realized he was about to find out. For better or worse, worlds were colliding today. The pristine, controlled environment of Blackwood Manor and the messy, complicated reality of the daughter he never knew he wanted. Blackwood Manor emerged from the mist like something from another time, a sprawling colonial estate perched on the highest hill overlooking Oak Ridge Valley. Manicured gardens surrounded the imposing white structure, and a circular driveway led to a columned entrance where a housekeeper waited, posture perfect even at this distance. Emma pressed her face against the window, eyes wide at the sight. She turned to Olivia, hands moving in an approximation of the signs she'd learned, clearly asking if people really lived in such a place. "Yes, this is where Andrew lives," Olivia confirmed, using the simple signs Rachel had taught her. "And your grandmother." Andrew watched this exchange in the rearview mirror, struck again by how quickly Olivia had connected with his daughter. During the 40-minute drive from the Foster farm, she had kept Emma engaged and calm, pointing out interesting sights and practicing basic signs. The contrast between Olivia's natural warmth and his own awkward attempts at connection was stark. As they pulled up to the entrance, Andrew felt a familiar tension settle between his shoulders, the same tension he'd carried throughout childhood in this house where perfection was expected and shortcomings were noted with cutting precision. "Ready?" he asked, meeting Emma's eyes in the mirror. The little girl nodded, straightening her new purple sweater with serious determination. The gesture was so unexpectedly adult that Andrew felt a smile tug at his lips. Whatever else Emma had inherited, from him, she clearly possessed the Blackwood sense of occasion. Martha, the housekeeper who had served the family for 3 decades, greeted them with practiced hospitality that did nothing to disguise her curiosity about the child. "Mrs. Blackwood is waiting in the garden room, Mr. Andrew," she said, her gaze lingering on Emma. "She's been preparing." The ominous note in that simple statement wasn't lost on Andrew. His mother's preparations typically involved strategic planning worthy of a military campaign. He placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder as they followed Martha through the gleaming marble foyer and down the hallway lined with ancestral portraits. Emma slowed, looking up at the stern faces of Blackwood patriarchs and matriarchs who had overseen lumber mills, coal mines, and eventually the real estate empire Andrew now controlled. Her gaze stopped on a particular portrait, Eleanor as a young woman, posed beside Andrew's late father. There was a striking resemblance between the haughty beauty in the portrait and the child now studying it with such intensity. "You look like her," Andrew said, kneeling beside Emma and pointing to Eleanor's image. "Same eyes." Emma considered. This then shook her head and pointed to Andrew instead, her meaning clear even without signs. She thought she looked like him. "She's right," Olivia said softly. "She has your profile, especially the chin." Before Andrew could process this observation, they reached the garden room, a grand solarium filled with exotic plants where Eleanor Blackwood held court on a white wicker chair, looking every inch the dynasty matriarch she was. At 72, she remained formidable, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture military straight, her pale blue eyes missing nothing. Those eyes fixed immediately on Emma, narrowing slightly as she took in every detail of the child's appearance. Andrew felt Emma shrink against his side, suddenly overwhelmed by the intensity of that gaze. "Mother," Andrew began. "Formally, this is Emma. Emma, this is your grandmother, Mrs. Blackwood." Eleanor rose with fluid grace, crossing the room with measured steps. She stopped directly in front of Emma, studying her with clinical detachment. "She has Jessica's coloring," she observed coolly, "but the bone structure is Blackwood. No doubt about the paternity." Andrew winced at the bluntness, but before he could respond, Eleanor did something unexpected. She knelt, bringing herself to Emma's eye level, a gesture Andrew had never seen his status-conscious mother make before. "Hello, Emma," she said clearly, making sure the child could see her lips. Then, to Andrew's astonishment, Eleanor's hands moved in a simple sign, the word for hello that Rachel had taught them yesterday. Emma's face transformed with surprise and delight. She signed back enthusiastically, adding several gestures Andrew couldn't follow. "She's asking how you know sign language," Olivia translated, looking as shocked as Andrew felt. Eleanor's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "My sister was deaf," she said, directing her words to Emma while signing simultaneously in rudimentary but clear movements. "I learned many years ago. I'm out of practice." Andrew stared at his mother in disbelief. In 42 years, she had never once mentioned having a deaf sister. The Blackwood family history had been recited to him countless times, a litany of achievements and strategic marriages, but this personal detail had been entirely omitted. "You never told me," he said, unable to keep the accusation from his voice. Eleanor rose, her moment of accessibility vanishing as she resumed her usual regal bearing. "You never asked about my childhood, Andrew. You were always too busy following your father's footsteps to show interest in mine." The rebuke stung with its accuracy. He had indeed modeled himself after his father, the ambitious businessman, the strategic thinker, the emotional fortress. It had never occurred to him that his mother might have stories of her own, vulnerabilities hidden beneath her polished exterior. "Martha will serve lunch on the terrace," Eleanor continued smoothly, as if the revelation meant nothing. "Miss Foster, I understand you're a veterinarian." "Still in training," Olivia corrected politely. I'm completing my residency at the large animal clinic in Oak Ridge. Admirable, Eleanor replied with what appeared to be genuine approval. The Fosters have been fixtures in this valley for generations. Your father's wildlife rehabilitation work is quite renowned. As they moved toward the terrace, Andrew found himself wrong-footed by his mother's unexpected knowledge of the Fosters and her hidden connection to the deaf community. Eleanor Blackwood had always been a mystery to him, a distant, demanding presence whose approval he sought but rarely received. Now, watching her interact with Emma, signing simple phrases and pointing out features of the garden, he glimpsed layers to her he had never suspected existed. Lunch was an elaborate affair despite being arranged on short notice. Martha had prepared all of Emma's favorites, information Eleanor must have extracted from Andrew's assistant after their phone call. Emma's eyes widened at the array of foods, her hands moving excitedly as she tried to sign everything she saw. Eleanor watched the child with an intensity that made Andrew uneasy. His mother never showed such interest without reason. She was calculating something, measuring possibilities against risks in that razor-sharp mind that had helped build the Blackwood fortune. "I've taken the liberty of making some arrangements," Eleanor announced, as dessert was served. "Dr. Margaret Chen will see Emma tomorrow morning. She's the leading pediatric audiologist in the state." "Mother, I appreciate the thought, but additionally," Eleanor continued as if he hadn't spoken, "I've contacted Westridge Academy. They have an excellent program for deaf students, with both mainstream integration and specialized instruction." Andrew set down his fork with deliberate control. "Mother, I haven't even legally established custody yet. It's premature to be making educational plans." "Nonsense, the legal aspects are a formality. I've already spoken with Judge Harrington. He understands the situation." Of course she had. Eleanor's network of influence extended through every institution in the region, cultivated over decades of strategic philanthropy and social maneuvering. "And what exactly is the situation, as you've explained it?" Andrew asked, his voice tight. "That my granddaughter has been found and will be raised as befits a Blackwood." Eleanor's tone made it clear this was non-negotiable. "I've also arranged for modifications to the East Wing. It will be converted into appropriate accommodations for Emma, including a suite for a live-in tutor, specializing in education for the deaf." Andrew felt a surge of anger at his mother's high-handed approach. "You seem to have planned everything without consulting me or considering what might be best for Emma." "I'm considering her future," Eleanor countered coldly. "Something you failed to do for the past 5 years." The barb hit its mark. Andrew fell silent, his righteous indignation deflated by the truth of her accusation. He had abdicated his responsibility as a father. What right did he have now to object to his mother's intervention? Throughout this exchange, Emma had been watching intently, her eyes moving between the adults. Though she couldn't hear the tension in their voices, she clearly sensed the conflict. Her small hands stilled on her dessert plate, her expression growing anxious. Olivia noticed immediately. "Emma," she signed carefully, using the limited vocabulary Rachel had taught her. "Would you like to see the fish pond Andrew mentioned?" Emma nodded eagerly, relieved by the diversion. Olivia looked to Eleanor for permission, which was granted, with a regal inclination of her head. "The garden path leads directly to it," Eleanor directed. "Martha will provide bread for the koi." As Olivia led Emma outside, Andrew turned to his mother, keeping his voice low but intense. "I appreciate your interest in Emma, but this is happening too quickly. She needs time to adjust, to feel secure. She's been through trauma." "All the more reason to establish stability immediately," Eleanor replied. "The foster farm is a charming temporary solution, but hardly suitable for her long-term development." "The Fosters have shown more genuine care for Emma in 2 days than I've managed in her entire life," Andrew countered. "She feels safe there." "Safety is not the only consideration. There's her education, her social development, her preparation for eventually taking her place in this family." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Unless you're planning to deny her the Blackwood name and inheritance?" "Of course not. She's my daughter." "A fact you were content to ignore until circumstances forced your hand." Eleanor's voice held the cutting edge he remembered from childhood reprimands. "If you truly want to make amends, Andrew, you'll ensure..." She has every advantage. That means bringing her here where she belongs. Andrew gazed out the window to where Emma was delightedly feeding the koi, Olivia kneeling beside her to explain something about the colorful fish. His daughter looked happy, animated, finally emerging from the shell of fear and uncertainty that had surrounded her when he found her. "And what about Jessica?" he asked quietly. "If she recovers?" Eleanor's expression hardened. The woman abandoned her child in a forest during a storm. She attempted to end her own life rather than face responsibility. Do you really believe she's fit to be a mother? The cruelty of this assessment made Andrew flinch, even as part of him acknowledged its logic. She was desperate, mother, alone. She'd lost her support system when Emma's grandmother passed. Circumstances explain behavior. They don't excuse. "It," Eleanor replied dismissively. "In any case, my sources at the hospital indicate her prognosis is guarded at best. We should prepare for the likelihood that you will have sole custody." The clinical way she discussed Jessica's condition sent a chill through Andrew. This was how Eleanor had always operated, assessing situations based on facts and strategic outcomes, emotional considerations secondary at best. "There's something else you should know," Eleanor continued, her voice lowering. "I've been making inquiries since your call. Jessica Reynolds sent letters not just 5 years ago, but repeatedly afterward. Birthday cards for Emma, updates on her development, requests, not for money but for acknowledgement." Andrew stared at his mother, a sick feeling growing in his stomach. "How do you know this?" "Because they came here, Andrew, to this house. While you were living in the Nashville penthouse, building your precious urban development projects." Eleanor's gaze was unflinching. "Your father instructed the staff to return them unopened. After his passing, I continued the policy, assuming it was what you wanted." The revelation hit Andrew like a physical blow. All these years, Jessica had been trying to reach him, to give him the opportunity to know his daughter. And his parents had intercepted these attempts, making decisions that shaped not only his life but Emma's as well. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Because I made a mistake," Eleanor admitted, the words clearly difficult for her. "When I saw Emma today, when I saw our family traits in her face, when I remembered my sister and how she was hidden away like a shameful secret because of her disability, I realized we had perpetuated a cycle of cruelty." For perhaps the first time in his life, Andrew saw genuine regret in his mother's eyes. It transformed her face, softening the aristocratic features into something more human, more vulnerable. "My sister died in an institution because our parents couldn't bear the imperfection she represented," Eleanor continued, her voice steady despite the painful admission. "I vowed to be different, yet when faced with an imperfect situation, an inconvenient grandchild with a disability, I made the same choice." She met Andrew's gaze directly. "I intend to correct that mistake." Before Andrew could respond to this unprecedented display of vulnerability from his mother, a commotion from the garden caught their attention. Olivia was hurrying toward the house, Emma in her arms. The child's face was pressed against Olivia's shoulder, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Andrew rushed outside, alarm surging through him. "What happened?" "I'm not entirely sure," Olivia said, her expression troubled. "We were feeding the fish and suddenly she became very upset. She kept signing something about her grandmother and water." Eleanor had followed Andrew onto the terrace, her face unusually pale. "Her grandmother," she repeated, "the one who raised her." Andrew recalled what Rachel had translated about Emma's past. Her grandmother had been the one to teach her sign language, to care for her when Jessica worked. The grandmother who had recently passed away. Did something happen to her grandmother? "Involving water?" Olivia asked, still holding the trembling child. A horrible suspicion formed in Andrew's mind. Rachel mentioned that Emma's grandmother died recently. Could she have... Was there water involved? Eleanor moved forward with surprising speed for her age, gently touching Emma's hair. The child looked up, tears streaming down her face. With careful, deliberate signs, Eleanor communicated something that made Emma nod vigorously, then collapse into fresh tears. "What did you ask her?" Andrew demanded. "If her grandmother went to sleep and didn't wake up beside water," Eleanor translated grimly. "She says yes. A bathtub. She found her." The horror of the image. Emma discovering her beloved grandmother, the one person who truly understood her, who had taught her to communicate, struck Andrew with devastating force. No wonder the pond had triggered such a reaction. How many more traumas lay buried in his daughter's short life, waiting to be uncovered? Olivia was murmuring comforting words to Emma, though the child couldn't hear them. The sentiment behind them seemed to transmit itself through her gentle embrace, the steady rhythm of her heart against Emma's ear. She needs to go back to the farm, Andrew decided. She feels safe there. All of this, the house, the plans, the doctors, it can wait. To his surprise, Eleanor nodded agreement. Yes, she's had enough upheaval for one day. She hesitated, then added, "But Andrew, we will revisit this discussion. Emma is a Blackwood. She deserves everything that name can provide." As they prepared to leave, Eleanor disappeared briefly into the house, returning with a small wooden box. She pressed it into Andrew's hands. "These belong to my sister. Teaching materials, photographs, letters. They might help you avoid the mistakes our family made." The gesture was so unexpected, so uncharacteristically sentimental, that Andrew could only nod his acceptance. This glimpse of his mother's hidden past, her concealed vulnerabilities, had shaken his understanding of her, and perhaps of himself. In the car, Emma gradually calmed, her tears subsiding as they left Blackwood Manor behind. Olivia had moved to the back seat to sit beside her, offering the silent comfort of her presence. By the time they reached the familiar landscape of Foster Farm, Emma had fallen asleep, emotionally exhausted from the day's events. Daniel was waiting, on the porch, his expression shifting from concern to relief as he saw Emma sleeping peacefully in Olivia's arms when they arrived. "Tough day?" he asked quietly. "Illuminating," Andrew replied, the wooden box from his mother heavy in his hands, "and complicated." As he watched Olivia carry his sleeping daughter into the farmhouse, Andrew felt the weight of generations of Blackwood decisions pressing down on him. The expectations, the legacy, the pattern of prioritizing appearance and advantage over emotional well-being. His mother had begun to recognize the damage of that approach, but too late to spare him the burden of continuing it. Now, looking at Emma's vulnerable sleeping form, Andrew made a silent promise. The cycle would end with him. Whatever came next, custody battles, educational decisions, integrating Emma into his life, would be guided by what she needed, not by what the Blackwood legacy demanded. The wooden box in his hands held clues to a family history he had never known. Existed. Perhaps within it lay the wisdom to forge a new path, one that honored the best of his heritage while rejecting its coldest calculations. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and doctors, decisions and plans. But tonight, watching his daughter sleep safely in a house filled with genuine warmth, Andrew allowed himself to imagine a future different from his past. A future where being a Blackwood meant something more than power and privilege. Something like love. 3 weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments, legal consultations, and sign language lessons. Andrew divided his time between the Foster Farm, where Emma continued to stay, and his increasingly neglected business responsibilities. The wooden box from his mother remained unopened on the passenger seat of his Range Rover, a constant reminder of family secrets he wasn't yet ready to explore. On a crisp October morning, Andrew arrived at the farm earlier than usual. The sunrise painted the mountains in shades of gold and amber, mist rising from the meadows like something from a dream. He found Emma already awake, sitting on the porch swing beside Olivia, both bundled in matching flannel blankets as they watched the day begin. "Good morning," he called, signing the greeting as he approached. His sign vocabulary was growing steadily, though his execution remained clumsy compared to the fluid movements Rachel demonstrated during their daily lessons. Emma's face lit up at the sight of him, a transformation that still caught him off guard. Somewhere in these weeks of visits, shared meals, and halting signed conversations, His daughter had begun to look forward to his arrival. She signed rapidly, her small hands expressive. "She's excited to show you something," Olivia translated, her own signing improving daily. "She's been waiting for you." Emma hopped off the swing and tugged at Andrew's hand, pulling him toward the stables with determined energy. The change in her from that first night was remarkable, her health restored, her confidence growing, her silent world expanding as more people learned to communicate with her. "Better hurry," Olivia laughed, following them. "She's been planning this surprise all week." The stables were warm and fragrant with the scent of hay and horses. Daniel was already there, brushing the gentle mare called Daisy that had become Emma's favorite. Next to him stood a small figure that Andrew didn't immediately recognize, a boy of about 7 with dark hair and serious eyes. "This is Miguel," Daniel explained as they approached. "He's Rachel's nephew. He's been deaf since birth." Miguel smiled shyly at Andrew, then turned his attention to Emma, his hands moving in greeting. Emma responded enthusiastically, her signing faster and more complex than Andrew had seen before. "She's been wanting to introduce you," Olivia explained. Rachel thought it would be good for Emma to meet another deaf child. They've become fast friends. Andrew watched as the two children communicated effortlessly in their shared language, a bittersweet feeling washing over him. Emma had been isolated for so long, cut off from peers who understood her experience. Now, seeing her animated conversation with Miguel, he realized how lonely she must have been. "Watch this," Daniel said, nodding toward the children. Miguel climbed onto a wooden mounting block, while Emma led Daisy forward with confident little hands. The horse stood perfectly still as Miguel reached out to stroke her neck, his expression transforming with wonder. "First time with a horse?" Andrew asked. Daniel nodded. Miguel's parents were hesitant, but Rachel convinced them to give it a try. Emma's been so excited to share her new skill. The scene unfolding before them was remarkable. Emma, once so fragile and fearful, was now guiding another child, showing Miguel how to offer an apple to Daisy, her face alight with pride as she shared her knowledge. There was something therapeutic in the interaction, not just for Miguel experiencing the gentle power of the horse for the first time, but for Emma as well, finding confidence in her ability to teach. "It's amazing," Andrew murmured, unable to take his eyes off his daughter. "She's transformed." "Horses can do that," Olivia said softly. "There's something about their presence. They don't judge, don't require words. They communicate through touch, through energy. For children who experience the world differently, that connection can be powerful." Andrew thought about the weeks of specialists he'd consulted, the audiologists who confirmed Emma's profound deafness was congenital, the psychologists who gently probed the trauma of her abandonment, the educational experts who assessed her cognitive abilities and learning needs. All necessary, all well-intentioned, but none had brought the spark of joy he now saw in Emma's face as she guided Miguel's hand along Daisy's velvet nose. This is what she needs, he realized aloud. This connection, this purpose. Daniel nodded, his weathered face thoughtful. Been thinking the same thing. Noticed how she comes alive around the horses. It's more than just liking animals, it's like they speak the same language. The idea that had been forming in Andrew's mind for days suddenly crystallized with perfect clarity. What if we expanded this, created a program specifically for deaf children to work with horses? Olivia looked at him with surprise. Equine. Therapy. More than that, Andrew continued, excitement building as the vision took shape. A place where deaf children could come to learn, to connect with the horses and with each other. A sanctuary. Daniel considered this, his expression cautious but interested. Would take resources. Special training for the horses, proper facilities, staff who know sign language. Resources I have, Andrew replied. What I lack is the expertise. The connection to the deaf community, the understanding of horses. He looked at Daniel and Olivia, the question unspoken but clear. Are you suggesting a partnership? Olivia asked, her eyes bright with the possibility. Before Andrew could respond, they were interrupted by Rachel's arrival. She approached with, a warm smile, signing greetings to the children before turning to the adults. "Miguel's parents are on their way," she announced. "They want to see what all the excitement is about. Their son hasn't stopped signing about horses all week." Andrew watched as more visitors arrived. Miguel's parents, cautious but open, two more families with deaf children whom Rachel had invited, Eleanor Blackwood, who had been making regular visits to see Emma, her signing skills rapidly returning with practice. The stable yard became a hub of activity, with Daniel patiently introducing each child to the horses, Olivia demonstrating basic grooming techniques, and Emma proudly showing off her riding skills atop Daisy. In the midst of this impromptu gathering, Andrew felt something shift inside him, a vision of possibility taking root. The isolated worlds he had inhabited, the corporate boardrooms, the luxury penthouses, the carefully managed public image, seemed suddenly hollow compared to the vibrant community forming before his eyes. "It could work," Rachel said, appearing beside him as if she had read his thoughts. "What you're thinking about? A therapeutic riding center for deaf children. There's nothing like it in this region." "How did you know I was considering it?" Rachel smiled. "I've been hoping someone would see the potential. These children need a place where their difference isn't a disability, where they can connect and grow through shared experience." The afternoon unfolded with an energy that seemed almost magical. Children who had arrived shy and uncertain were soon laughing silently, their hands flying in animated conversation. Parents who had been strangers discovered common challenges and shared hopes. Even Eleanor, typically reserved and formal, had shed her usual armor to engage with the children, her signing fluid and natural in a way Andrew had never witnessed before. As the gathering began to disperse with the fading light, Andrew found himself standing with Daniel and Olivia near the paddock fence, watching Emma say goodbye to her new friends. "I meant what I said earlier," he told them quietly. "About creating something here, something permanent." Daniel nodded slowly. "Farm's been in my family for generations, never thought about changing its purpose, but seeing those kids today..." He trailed off, his gaze thoughtful. "Land should be used where it does the most good. Maybe this is what it's been waiting for." "We'd need to draw up plans," Olivia added, practical even in her enthusiasm. "Figure out what modifications we'd need, what kind of staffing, how to structure the programs." "I can provide the funding," Andrew assured them. "Create a foundation to ensure ongoing support, but you two and Rachel would be the heart of it. I know nothing about horses or deaf education. This would be a true partnership." The conversation continued as they walked back to the farmhouse, the evening air crisp with autumn and possibility. Inside they found Eleanor sitting at the kitchen table with Emma, their hands moving in conversation that seemed unusually intense for a 5-year-old. When they noticed the others, Emma signed something to Eleanor, who nodded with surprising gentleness. "Emma has been telling me about her ideas for helping other children like her," Eleanor explained, her typical briskness softened. "She seems to have inherited the Blackwood talent for ambitious planning." Andrew felt a surge of pride, watching his daughter's animated signing as she explained her vision of more horses, more children, a special place where they could all belong. The transformation in her since that rainy night was nothing short of miraculous. From the abandoned, feverish child to this confident little person with dreams and plans. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep and the adults gathered in the living room to discuss the therapeutic riding center in earnest, Andrew finally opened the wooden box his mother had given him. Inside, he found photographs of a young girl with Eleanor's eyes and a bright smile, his aunt whose existence had been hidden from him. Letters written in careful print, documenting her thoughts and experiences in the institution where she had lived, teaching materials for sign language from the 1950s, preserved with evident care. "Her name was Margaret," Eleanor said quietly, watching as Andrew examined the contents. "She was 2 years younger than me. Brilliant, artistic, full of life, but born deaf in an era when that was considered a family shame." The room fell silent as Eleanor spoke of her sister for the first time in decades, the childhood bond, the forced separation when Margaret was sent away, the promises Eleanor had made to visit, but gradually failed to keep as she was molded into the perfect Blackwood heiress. "I received word of her passing on my wedding day," Eleanor continued, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "My parents didn't tell me until after the ceremony, didn't want to spoil the occasion. She had been ill for months, alone except for institution staff." Andrew looked at his mother with new understanding. The rigid perfectionism, the emotional distance, the emphasis on the Blackwood legacy, all of it rooted in a trauma she had never acknowledged, a guilt she had carried silently for decades. "That's why you want to help Emma," he realized. "You see Margaret in her." Eleanor nodded, her composure finally cracking. "I failed my sister. I won't fail my granddaughter." The vulnerability in his mother's admission changed something fundamental between them. For the first time, Andrew saw her not as the intimidating matriarch who had shaped his life with exacting standards, but as a woman who had been shaped herself by loss and regret. "We won't fail her," Andrew promised, reaching for his mother's hand in a gesture of connection he couldn't remember ever initiating before. "And maybe, through Emma, we can do something meaningful for Margaret's memory too." The planning continued late into the night, practical discussions of land use and building requirements interwoven with deeper conversations about healing, connection, and second chances. By morning, the vision had taken clearer shape. Blackwood Foster Sanctuary, a therapeutic riding center specifically designed for deaf children, combining Eleanor's financial resources and connections, Andrew's business acumen, Daniel's knowledge of the land, and Olivia's veterinary expertise. When Emma woke to find the adults still gathered around the kitchen table, surrounded by notes and sketches, her eyes widened with curious excitement. Rachel, who had stayed to help translate, explained the evolving plans. Emma's face transformed with joy as she understood what they were creating, a place where her two worlds would come together, where her deafness would be not a limitation, but a connecting point to others like her. Over the following days, the project gained momentum. Eleanor leveraged her considerable influence to expedite permits and zoning approvals. Andrew's architectural team produced preliminary designs for an accessible riding arena and learning center. Daniel began identifying which horses would be suitable for therapy work, while Olivia researched specialized training programs. Through it all, Emma watched with growing excitement, her input surprisingly insightful for a child her age. Each evening she would sit with Andrew, as Rachel taught them both new signs, their vocabulary expanding to include the language of horses, building, and dreams. 1 week after the impromptu gathering in the stable yard, Andrew received the call he had been both anticipating and dreading. Jessica Reynolds had regained consciousness. Her condition was stable but fragile, her recovery expected to be long and complicated. The news sent Andrew into a tailspin of conflicting emotions, relief that Emma's mother would survive, anxiety about what her recovery meant for his newfound relationship with his daughter, uncertainty about how to proceed with the custody arrangement he had begun to pursue. "You need to tell Emma," Olivia advised gently when he shared the news. "And then, you need to visit Jessica." "What if she doesn't want me to be part of Emma's life?" Andrew asked, voicing his deepest fear. "After what I did, what if she fights for full custody?" Olivia considered this, her expression thoughtful. "From everything we've learned about Jessica, her primary concern has always been Emma's well-being. Show her what you're building here. Show her that you're committed to being the father Emma deserves." The logic was sound, but the emotional terrain remained treacherous. With Rachel's help, Andrew carefully explained to Emma that her mother was awake, was asking for her, would be able to see her soon. The child's reaction was complex, joy mixed with uncertainty, excitement tempered by the memory of that terrible night in the forest. The following day, Andrew drove to Bristol Memorial Hospital. Alone, the weight of pending conversations heavy on his shoulders. He found Jessica in a private room, Eleanor's influence ensuring the best care available. She looked small against the white sheets, her once vibrant features drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes, Emma's eyes, were alert and wary as he entered. "Jessica," he began, the inadequacy of any opening apparent. Where is she?" Jessica interrupted, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Where's Emma?" "She's safe," Andrew assured her quickly. "She's staying with a family near Oakridge, the Fosters. She's doing well, healthy, happy." Relief flooded Jessica's pale face. "Thank God, I thought—" She broke off, tears filling her eyes. "I did something unforgivable, Andrew. I abandoned my baby, our baby." The raw pain in her voice stripped away any prepared speeches, any careful negotiations Andrew had planned. This was not the confrontation he had feared, but something far more fundamental. Two people united by concern for a child they had both failed in different ways. "I know about your mother," Andrew said quietly. "Emma told us she passed away. That she was the one who raised Emma, taught her sign language." Jessica nodded, tears streaming freely now. "Mom was everything to us. When she got sick, everything fell apart. I couldn't manage alone, working 3 jobs trying to communicate with Emma, watching our savings disappear with Mom's medical bills." She looked directly at Andrew, her gaze unflinching despite her tears. "I convinced myself that finding you was the answer, that you'd changed, matured, that when you actually saw her, you'd want to be her father." The memory of that rejection, which Andrew had learned about through Emma and Rachel's translations, hung between them, unspoken but painfully present. "I wasn't home," Andrew said, the explanation sounding hollow even to his own ears. "My housekeeper turned you away. By the time I learned you had come looking for me, it was too late." "I drove for hours," Jessica continued, her voice distant as she relived that terrible night. "Emma was so sick. I had no money for medicine, nowhere to turn. I just broke. I convinced myself she'd be better off without me. That someone would find her, someone who could give her what I couldn't." Her breathing hitched. "It was like I was outside myself, watching someone else leave her there. The moment I drove away, I wanted to go back, but I was too ashamed, too scared." Andrew moved closer to the bed, drawn by the raw humanity of her confession. "I found her, Jessica. By some miracle, I was the one who found her." Jessica's eyes widened. "You? How?" "I was driving to a property site, saw something by the roadside during the storm." Andrew paused, the cosmic coincidence of that moment still astonishing to him. "I took her to the nearest house, the Foster farm. They helped save her. And then I discovered who she was, who I was to her." "And now?" Jessica asked, vulnerability and fear evident in her voice. "What happens now?" It was the question that had haunted Andrew for days, the uncertain future that loomed beyond this hospital room. But looking at Jessica, this woman who had carried and birthed and loved his child while he remained oblivious, he suddenly knew there was only one right answer. "Now we do better," he said simply. "Both of us. Together somehow." The tension in Jessica's face eased slightly. "You don't hate me for what I did?" "How could I? My failures came first and lasted longer." Andrew hesitated, then added, "Emma is extraordinary, Jessica. She's resilient and bright and full of love. You and your mother did that. You gave her that foundation despite everything." Fresh tears welled in Jessica's eyes, but these seemed different, tears of relief, perhaps even hope. "Can I see her?" "As soon as you're stronger. The doctors say you need more time." Andrew pulled out his phone, opening the gallery of photos he'd been accumulating over the past weeks. "But until then, let me show you how she's doing." For the next hour, they sat together as Andrew shared images of Emma riding Daisy, playing with Miguel, signing with Rachel, helping Daniel in the stables. He told Jessica about the therapeutic riding center they were planning, about Emma's central role in inspiring it, about the community forming around their daughter. "She loves horses," Jessica said wonderingly, touching the screen where Emma's joyful face beamed back at them. "Mum used to read her a book about a girl and her horse, over and over until the pages were falling out." She mentioned that book, Andrew recalled, the first day with the Fosters. Dustai shared knowledge, this small detail about their daughter's preferences, created a tentative bridge between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. As Andrew prepared to leave, promising to return the following day, Jessica caught his hand. "Andrew," she said, her voice stronger now, "I don't want to fight you for her. I just want to be part of her life again. To make amends, to do better, like you said." The relief that flooded through him was immediate and profound. "We'll figure it out," he promised, "step by step. What matters is Emma, giving her the stability and love she deserves." Driving back to the Foster farm, Andrew felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The conversation with Jessica had been difficult, but healing in ways he hadn't anticipated. There would be challenges ahead, legal, practical, emotional, but the core conflict he had feared seemed dissolved by their shared recognition of past failures and present responsibility. As he pulled into the farm's driveway, Andrew saw Emma waiting on the porch, her small figure silhouetted against the golden afternoon light. She waved enthusiastically when she spotted his car, running down the steps to meet him. Kneeling to embrace her, Andrew felt the final pieces of his fragmented life begin to align. His daughter in his arms, a partnership forming with the Fosters, a path to reconciliation with Jessica, even a new understanding with his mother, connections forging where once there had been only isolation and ambition. Emma signed eagerly, asking about her mother, her blue eyes anxious yet hopeful. "She's getting better," Andrew signed back carefully, each gesture deliberate. "She loves you very much. She wants to see you soon." The relief in Emma's expression was beautiful to behold. She signed something else, a question about whether her mother would like the horses too. "I think she will," Andrew replied, both in signs and spoken words. "I think she'll love everything we're building here." Hand in hand, they walked toward the farmhouse where Olivia waited with dinner and Daniel with news of construction permits approved. Behind them, the sun cast long shadows across the fields where Blackwood Foster Sanctuary would soon rise, a place of healing born from brokenness, of connection forged through separation, of new beginnings emerging from the wreckage of the past. 1 year later, the grounds of Blackwood Foster Sanctuary hummed with activity under the warm June sun. What had once been simple pasture land was now a thoughtfully designed complex of riding arenas, stable blocks, and classroom facilities. Flowering vines climbed the walls of the main building, and carefully planned sensory gardens lined the pathways between structures. Andrew stood on the observation deck overlooking the central arena, watching as Olivia led a riding lesson for 6 deaf children. Emma was among them, sitting tall on Daisy's back, her confidence evident in every movement. At 6 years old, she had blossomed into a natural leader among her peers, often demonstrating techniques for newer riders with patient hands and encouraging smiles. "She's a born teacher," Jessica commented, joining Andrew at the railing. "Gets that from my mother." The past year had been one of healing and gradual rebuilding for Jessica. After months of physical recovery and therapy, she had moved into a cottage on the sanctuary grounds, where she now worked as the administrative coordinator. The arrangement had evolved naturally, a shared custody that prioritized Emma's stability, while allowing both parents to be actively involved in her life. "The new family arrives today," Jessica reminded him, checking her watch. "The Millers. Their twins were diagnosed last year. They've been on the waiting list for months." Andrew nodded, a familiar sense of purpose settling over him. In the year since its founding, Blackwood Foster Sanctuary had grown from a local resource to a nationally recognized center for equine therapy, specifically designed for deaf children. Families came from across the country, some for weekend programs, others relocating to the small community that had formed around the sanctuary. "Is Daniel back from Nashville?" he asked, scanning the grounds for the veterinarian who had become both business partner and friend. "This morning. The conference went well. 3 more riding centers interested in implementing our training program." Jessica smiled, pride evident in her expression. "Your mother is showing him the new scholarship. Funding projections." The mention of Eleanor brought a small smile to Andrew's face. His mother had surprised everyone with her passionate involvement in the sanctuary. What had begun as a personal mission of atonement had evolved into genuine advocacy. She had leveraged her considerable influence to secure funding, partnerships, and political support. transforming from Tennessee Society matriarch to fierce champion for deaf education and accessibility. Mr. Blackwood. Andrew turned to see Rachel approaching, her signing simultaneous with her spoken greeting, a habit all the sanctuary staff had developed to model inclusive communication. "The documentary crew is ready for your interview," Rachel informed him. "They're set up in the main office." The PBS documentary on innovative approaches to deaf education had been filming at the sanctuary for 3 days. Initially reluctant to participate, Andrew had eventually agreed when Emma pointed out that their story might help other families like theirs. "I'll be right there," he promised, turning back to Jessica. "Will you check on the new family when they arrive? Make sure the welcome packets are ready." Jessica nodded, her hand briefly touching his arm, a gesture of partnership that had become comfortable over months of working together. Their relationship had evolved into something neither could have imagined during those dark days a year ago. Not romance rekindled, but a deep respect and shared purpose centered on their daughter. As Andrew made his way to the administrative building, he passed Daniel and Eleanor deep in conversation beside the memorial garden. The small, peaceful space had been Eleanor's idea, a tribute to Margaret, her long-hidden sister, and to Emma's grandmother, whose dedication to her granddaughter had laid the foundation for everything that followed. "Andrew," Eleanor called, gesturing him over. "Daniel has excellent news from the conference. The State Education Department wants to use our curriculum as a model for all equine therapy programs." At 73, Eleanor Blackwood remained formidable, but the rigid perfectionism that had once defined her had softened into passionate advocacy. She spent half her time at the sanctuary and half at Blackwood Manor, which now hosted regular fundraising events for deaf education initiatives. "That's fantastic," Andrew replied, genuinely pleased. The curriculum they had developed, combining sign language instruction, horsemanship, academic support, and emotional wellness, had proven remarkably effective. "We should celebrate at Emma's birthday party this weekend." Daniel nodded, his weathered face creased in a smile. "Olivia's already planning an announcement. She wants to surprise the kids." The mention of Olivia brought a different kind of warmth to Andrew's expression, one that didn't go unnoticed by his mother, whose raised eyebrow communicated volumes. The growing connection between Andrew and Olivia had been developing slowly, respectfully, both of them cautious about disrupting the delicate balance of their professional partnership and Emma's stability. "The documentary crew is waiting," Andrew said, deflecting the unspoken observation. "I should get to the interview." As he walked away, he heard Eleanor's soft laugh behind him, a sound that had become increasingly common as she allowed herself to embrace joy after decades of rigid control. In the administrative building, the PBS crew had transformed the conference room into an interview space. The producer, a thoughtful woman named Maya, greeted Andrew warmly. "We're so grateful for your time," she said, as a technician adjusted his microphone. "Your story is exactly what we hope to feature. How personal experience can transform into community impact." Andrew settled into the chair, still somewhat uncomfortable with being the public face of the sanctuary. In his previous life as a developer, he had given countless interviews about buildings and business deals, speaking about Emma, about the sanctuary, about the personal journey that had led him here. That vulnerability remained challenging. "Let's start with the beginning," Maya suggested once the cameras were rolling. "How did Blackwood Foster Sanctuary come to exist?" Andrew took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "The simplest answer is that it began with a storm," he said, "and a little girl abandoned in the rain." Over the next hour, he shared the story that had changed everything. Finding Emma, discovering she was his daughter, the gradual building of trust and connection. He spoke of the Foster's kindness, of Rachel's guidance, of the moment he realized that horses offered Emma a unique form of communication and confidence. "What's been the most surprising outcome of this project?" Maya asked as the interview neared its conclusion. Andrew considered the question carefully. "The community," he answered finally. "We set out to create a therapeutic riding program, but what's emerged is a true community. Families supporting each other, children finding friendship and belonging, professionals from different fields collaborating in new ways. And for you personally, Maya pressed gently, how has this changed your life? The question struck at the heart of the transformation Andrew rarely articulated. Before Emma, I measured success in dollars and developments, he said slowly. I built structures, not connections. I accumulated wealth, but had no real wealth of experience. He paused, finding the right words. Emma taught me that the most important foundations aren't built of concrete and steel, but of understanding, patience, and love. When the interview concluded, Andrew felt drained but satisfied. The documentary would help spread awareness about deaf education and equine therapy, potentially inspiring similar programs elsewhere. That possibility alone made the discomfort of personal disclosure worthwhile. Outside, the afternoon lesson had ended. Andrew spotted Emma helping younger children unsaddle their horses, her hands moving in fluid instruction. At 6, she was already bilingual in a way many adults never achieved, fluent in ASL and increasingly proficient in written English, bridging worlds with natural ease. As if sensing his presence, Emma looked up, her face brightening. She signed quickly to Olivia before running toward him, her blonde braid bouncing against her back. Andrew knelt to receive her enthusiastic hug, still marveling at how completely this small person had transformed his existence. "How was your ride?" he signed, their private conversations now conducted entirely in ASL, a language he had studied with single-minded determination over the past year. Emma's hands flew in excited description of how she had helped a new student overcome fear, her pride evident in the expressiveness of her signing. Andrew watched, entranced as always by her ability to paint pictures with movement, to convey complex emotions without a single spoken word. "The Millers are here," she signed finally. "The twins are afraid of the horses. I'm going to help them." Andrew nodded, his chest tight with pride. "You're a good teacher," he signed back. "Patient like your grandmother." The mention of her grandmother brought a solemn nod from Emma. Though the acute grief had softened with time, she still visited the memorial garden often, bringing wildflowers to place beside the simple stone bearing her grandmother's name. "Mom is showing them the stables," Emma continued. "Can I introduce them to Daisy first? She's the gentlest." "Good idea," Andrew agreed. "I'll come with you." Hand in hand, they walked toward the main stable block where Jessica was indeed guiding a nervous-looking couple and their twin boys, about 4 years old, through the facility. The boys clung to each other, their matching expressions wary, as they took in the unfamiliar environment. Emma approached carefully, kneeling to their eye level before signing a gentle greeting. The twins watched, fascinated, as Jessica translated. When Emma held out her hands in invitation, the boys hesitated only briefly before placing their small palms in hers. With infinite patience, Emma led them to Daisy's stall, where the gentle mare lowered her head in greeting. Using simple signs and expressive gestures, Emma demonstrated how to offer an apple slice on a flat palm. The transformation in the twins' faces as Daisy delicately accepted their offerings was magical, fear melting into wonder. "She's remarkable," Olivia said quietly, appearing beside Andrew as they watched the scene unfold. "Sometimes I forget she's only 6. Andrew nodded, unable to express the complex emotions swelling in his chest. "She's had to navigate so much," he replied, "but she does it with such grace." Olivia's hand found his, a gesture that had become increasingly natural over months. Five shared work and gradual personal connection. "The celebration tomorrow, is everything ready?" "As ready as it can be," Andrew smiled, "though I'm still not sure how we're going to keep it a surprise." The celebration in question was not only Emma's 6th birthday party, but also the 1-year anniversary of Blackwood Foster Sanctuary. What had begun as a small gathering had expanded to include all the families they had served, supporters, volunteers, and the growing community that had formed around their work. "Eleanor has been remarkably secretive about her gift," Olivia commented. "Daniel thinks it's something to do with the expansion plans, but she won't confirm anything." Andrew laughed softly. "My mother has discovered the joy of surprises late in life. She's making up for lost time." As the afternoon progressed into evening, Andrew found himself drawn to the quiet hill overlooking the sanctuary grounds. The setting sun cast golden light across the buildings and pastures, highlighting the transformation of the once simple farm into a place of purpose and healing. Daniel joined him there, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Quite a view," he commented, passing one of the mugs to Andrew. "Hard to believe what a year can bring?" Andrew accepted the coffee gratefully. "I was just thinking the same thing. Last June I was focused on nothing but the next development deal, the next acquisition. And now you're running a non-profit, raising a daughter, and making eyes at my daughter when you think no one's looking," Daniel observed dryly. Andrew nearly choked on his coffee. "I thought I was being subtle." "About as subtle as a herd of horses," Daniel replied, though his tone held no disapproval. "Olivia's not much better, for what it's worth." They stood in companionable silence, watching as the sanctuary's day wound down, children departing with parents, horses being led to evening pastures, staff completing final tasks before heading home. "You know," Daniel said finally, "when you first brought Emma to our door that night, I never would have predicted any of this. You seemed like just another wealthy man passing through, handling an inconvenient situation." "I was," Andrew acknowledged. "Or at least I thought I was." Daniel shook his head. "No, there was something else there, even then, the way you carried her, protected her. Something in you was ready to change. You just needed the catalyst." The observation struck Andrew as profoundly true. He had been sleepwalking through a life of acquisition and achievement, accumulating wealth and influence without purpose or connection. Finding Emma hadn't just given him a daughter, it had awakened him to a different way of measuring value, of defining success. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing something in me I couldn't see myself, for giving us a chance." Daniel clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture that conveyed more than words could express. "Come on, Jessica's ordered pizza for the staff meeting. We need to finalize tomorrow's celebration details." The following day dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself approved of the celebration. By mid-morning, the sanctuary grounds were transformed with colorful banners, activity stations, and a small stage area for presentations. Families began arriving early, the children rushing excitedly toward the stables while parents gathered in conversational clusters. Emma, resplendent in a new blue dress that matched her eyes, appointed herself unofficial greeter, welcoming each arrival with the perfect combination of hostess dignity and childish enthusiasm. The birthday girl circulated through the growing crowd with easy confidence, equally comfortable with deaf and hearing guests, children and adults. "She gets that from you," Jessica commented, appearing at Andrew's side as he watched their daughter. "That ability to work a room." Andrew laughed. "I think it's more likely from your mother. According to Emma, she never met a stranger." The mention of Emma's grandmother no longer brought immediate pain. Time and healing had transformed their shared grief into gentle remembrance. The memorial garden had helped, a tangible place to honor those whose absence was felt, but whose influence remained. "The Millers are back," Jessica noted, nodding toward the parking area where yesterday's new family was arriving. The twins looked less terrified today. Indeed, the boys who had been so fearful were now tugging their parents forward eagerly, clearly excited to return to the horses and to Emma, who had made such an impression. "Another sanctuary success story," Andrew smiled. "Though I think our daughter deserves most of the credit for that one." The celebration officially began at noon, with Daniel welcoming everyone from the small stage. The program included demonstrations by the children, testimonials from parents, and recognition of the staff and volunteers who had made the sanctuary's first year so successful. When it came time for Andrew's speech, he found himself momentarily overwhelmed by the sight before him. Dozens of families whose lives had been touched by the sanctuary, the dedicated team who had brought the vision to reality, and at the center of it all, Emma, her face tilted, up toward him with unabashed pride. "A year ago," he began, signing as he spoke, "many of us in this circle were strangers. Some of us were lost, searching for connection, for understanding, for a place to belong." He paused, meeting Emma's eyes. I was perhaps the most lost of all, though I didn't know it then. The crowd listened with rapt attention as Andrew spoke of transformation, of a stormy night that changed everything, of a little girl who taught him a new language of the heart, of a community that formed around shared challenges and hopes. Blackwood Foster. Sanctuary exists because of a series of seeming accidents that I've come to believe were anything but accidental, he continued. A child abandoned precisely where she would be found by the father who had rejected her. A family with the exact combination of skills and compassion needed to help her heal. A teacher who arrived at the right moment to bridge worlds of silence and sound. As he concluded his remarks, Andrew noticed Eleanor standing at the back of the gathering, her expression uncharacteristically emotional. Beside her stood a small group of people he didn't immediately recognize. An older man in a wheelchair, 2 middle-aged women, and a teenage boy, all watching with intense interest. Before Andrew could wonder about these unexpected guests, Eleanor moved forward, requesting the microphone. This was not part of the planned program, but no one would deny Eleanor Blackwood when she was determined to speak. Many of you know me as Emma's grandmother, or as the sanctuary's primary benefactor. She began, her voice strong despite her evident emotion. What you may not know is why this place matters so deeply to me. With quiet dignity, Eleanor shared the story she had kept hidden for decades. Her sister Margaret, born deaf in an era of institutionalization and shame, separated from family, and denied the love and opportunities she deserved. Margaret never had the chance to experience what we've created here, Eleanor continued. She never knew the joy of communication without barriers, of connection through shared experience rather than shared hearing. She paused, gathering herself. But her spirit lives in every corner of this sanctuary, in every child who finds their voice, in every family that discovers new ways to connect. Then, with a gesture that surprised everyone, Eleanor beckoned forward the unknown guests Andrew had noticed earlier. Today I'm honored to introduce Margaret's son Thomas and his family, my nephew whom I've only recently found after decades of searching. A murmur of surprise rippled through the gathering. Emma, standing beside Andrew, tugged at his hand questioningly. He knelt to explain in sign what Eleanor had just revealed, that they had family they never knew existed, connected through Margaret's story. Thomas is deaf, like his mother was, Eleanor continued, her signing now as fluid as her speech. He's a professor of deaf studies at Gallaudet University. When he learned about our sanctuary, through the preliminary coverage of the PBS documentary, he reached out to me. After 50 years of separation, Margaret's family and ours are reunited. The emotional impact of this revelation washed through the crowd. Jessica moved to stand beside Andrew and Emma, forming a united front as Thomas approached them. The older man's hands moved in graceful signs, which Rachel stepped forward to translate. My mother spoke of her sister often, Thomas signed. She never forgot you, Eleanor, and she would be proud beyond words to see what you've created here, not just a sanctuary for deaf children, but a bridge between worlds. As formal introductions gave way to conversation, Andrew watched in wonder as Emma fearlessly engaged with her newfound relatives. She showed particular interest in Thomas's teenage grandson, who was also deaf, and who responded to her endless questions with patient amusement. Family has a way of finding itself, Olivia observed, joining Andrew as the celebration transitioned into more casual interaction, even across decades and distances. Andrew nodded, still processing the day's revelations. My mother never ceases to surprise me lately. A year ago, I would have said I knew everything important about her. Now, I realize I knew almost nothing at all. The afternoon unfolded in a tapestry of connections, children riding, families sharing stories, staff and volunteers celebrating their collective accomplishments. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the sanctuary grounds, Andrew found himself drawn again to the quiet hilltop overlooking it all. Emma found him there, slipping her small hand into his with the easy confidence of absolute trust. Together they watched the activity below, Thomas and Eleanor deep in conversation by the memorial garden, Jessica showing Thomas's family the stable facilities, Daniel and Olivia leading a final riding demonstration for a group of enthusiastic children. "Happy?" Andrew signed to his daughter. Emma nodded emphatically, then signed with the expressive fluency that never failed to move him. "This is where I belong, where we all belong." The simple truth of her statement resonated deeply. From the darkest moment of abandonment had emerged this place of belonging, not just for Emma, but for dozens of children and families, for a community formed around shared needs and shared purpose. As twilight gathered, the celebration culminated with a surprise Eleanor had arranged, a silent symphony performed by a deaf dance troupe, their movements accompanied by vibrations rather than audible music, telling stories through gesture and expression that transcended the divide between hearing and non-hearing worlds. Emma watched, transfixed, her face illuminated by lantern light, her expression reflecting the perfect understanding that came from experiencing art through different senses. Beside her, Jessica and Andrew exchanged a glance of shared wonder at their daughter, at this moment, at the journey that had brought them here. When the performance concluded, the dancers invited the children to join them, creating an impromptu workshop in movement and expression. Emma was among the first to participate, her natural grace and confidence drawing others to follow her lead. Watching her in the gathering dusk, surrounded by new friends and newfound family, Andrew felt a profound sense of completion. The broken pieces of his life, the emotional distance of his childhood, the mistake of rejecting Emma, the hollow success of his business empire, had been reformed into something whole and meaningful. Olivia appeared beside him, her presence as natural and necessary as breath. "Penny, for your thoughts," she said softly. "I was thinking about foundations," Andrew replied, taking her hand in his, "about how we build what matters." Above them, the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the evening sky. Below, in the lantern-lit sanctuary grounds, Emma danced with joyful abandon, her silent world full of music only she could feel. All around them, the community they had built together celebrated not just a birthday or an anniversary, but the profound discovery that sometimes in the silence between words, the most important truths can be heard. And in that moment, watching his daughter move to music beyond hearing, Andrew understood with perfect clarity what Emma had been teaching him all along, that the most powerful connections transcend conventional communication. That family is defined by love rather than biology, and that sometimes the greatest gifts arrive in the most unexpected storms.